And Carlos dropped out. I don't know where Carlos went, but should pop back in any minute. It's been a technical day.
I've been there.
All right.
Yeah.
YouTube is up. I got it muted. I got the chat up. So hold on. All right.
You want to get rolling when he pops back in? I'll pop back in.
Yeah, it's fine. I can always like edit the video to where it doesn't show that he wasn't on.
Yeah, works for me. All right, we'll count down here to the classic Wayne's World in 5, 4, 3. What is up, everybody? It is Wednesday night, and you know what that means. It's another installment of Late Night Reds Talk, celebrating our beloved Cincinnati Reds, who are, for some reason, for the first time in a long time in August, in the playoff running. So we're excited to be talking about that with one of our favorite people for our guest today. I am Tim Daniel, as always, joined by Mr. Nick Kirby. How's it going, man?
Oh, what's going on? Just celebrating that big Oakland win this afternoon.
Yes, the Oakland A's get a big win to help the Reds out. I will not say anything ever again about opposition of the Reds, because every time I do, something bad happens. We are waiting for Carlos to get back on. We're waiting for him to join back, but we are joined by our guest. He is the talk host for ESPN 1530. You can see him at the Reds games dunking cups occasionally. This is
That's
Mr.
Great. That's what you want to be known for. That's what we're aiming for.
I meant it nicely.
I came in the room and Carlos left. Does he not like me? Did I say something?
I don't think that's what it is. I think he just dropped out. He's
yeah, Mo's here. Just to hell with this. I'm not going to waste my time. You've had some esteemed guests on this show, and now you have a guy who's now known for dunking beer cups. Wow.
That's not what you're known for.
I watched this with C. Trent, who is the president of the Baseball Writers Association of America. Very prestigious thing, right? And deserved. I mean, C. Trent's the best. And he's up there. I'm watching him in Cooperstown the other day. He's with Al Michaels. He's with Hawk Harrelson. He's with all these distinguished honorees. You had him on this show, and now you have a carnival barker who dunks beer cups at the ballpark. Must be.
I played a part
proud.
in that.
Carlos is back. I was starting to think it was something I said.
So join us. Yes. Welcome back, Mr. Carlos Guevara. Thanks for joining us, buddy. We're happy to have you back. So Mo, obviously your first time with us here on Late Night Reds Talk Live. We're excited to have you, and got to get into a bunch of questions about the team's success. But one of the things I kind of am curious to ask is, now that we just had this incredible Joey Votto run where he was hitting 7 straight homers. I mean, 9 homers in 7 games. You being in Cincinnati media, you've seen this guy his whole career, and this conversation's come up. Is this probably, even though with the MVPs and the incredible seasons he's had, has this been the most fun season to cover Joey Votto for you?
Yeah. I was telling somebody today, beyond Joey Votto, this season's been a talk show host's dream. And as somebody who, season ticket holder, loves the team, cares about him, all that stuff. But I mean, just the highs and lows of this season, you could say a lot of things about this team, good and bad. What you cannot accuse them of is not engaging people and not being interesting. And at the front of that list is Joey Votto. Number one, for the season that he's had. Number two, there has been this run. He's always been an interesting guy. He's always been I think a funny guy, but it's taken a turn for the better, and it's coincided with this run that he's gone on. And it's done 2 things. Number one, it's come at the precise right time. I think the guys on the TV broadcast, I don't know if it was today or last night, but they were talking about the fact that, this has occurred at precisely the right time, right? You're without Nick Castellanos after that dreadful homestand to start the second half of the season. It kind of felt like the season was kind of, hanging by a thread, and Joey goes crazy. And, there was the game in Chicago where he hits the 2 homers and makes the play where he starts the double play, reaching into the stands or to the netting, I guess, whatever it was. And it was a guy doing everything. And this is a player who is often, I think quite mistakenly, been referred to as not clutch. He doesn't come up big. You hear that all the time. And that's such a lazy argument. This is the epitome of a guy coming up huge for his team at precisely the right time. The other thing it's done from my vantage point, the 2 athletes in this city that we have talked about the most since I started on the air in 2007 are Andy Dalton and Joey Votto. I get why Andy Dalton was polarizing, right? Because he was okay. Joey Votto somehow became the most polarizing guy we talked about. And I mean, I've said this often in recent years that I'll never forget sitting there in the summer of 2013 as he's having a great year for a pretty good Reds club. And the guy that everybody would want to talk about was Joey. Is he walking too much? Is he ever going to live up to the contract? Did they make a mistake? And I'm like, this team's got a lot of problems. He's not one of them. I think what he's done this year is I believe he has finally won over some holdovers. You're always going to have people who solely look at him through the lens of how much money he's making, and nothing he does is going to be enough. He could hit 450 and hit a walk-off homer in, the bottom of the ninth inning of Game 7 of the World Series, and it's just not going to be enough. I think he has earned perhaps the begrudging respect and admiration of fans who were holdovers. And maybe it's because he's doing something as simple as hitting more home runs. That has been the interesting part to me. Is I finally have heard from a lot of people who said, haven't always been a huge Joey Votto guy, but I like this version and this team. You don't know where it would be without him going on this offensive surge that he's gone on, certainly since he came off the injured list, but specifically here the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think the coming out of the shell thing's been really good too. Like you said, like he's always been kind of funny and kind of had a dry sense of humor. But today he's on Dan Patrick and had a great 15-minute segment where he was really funny and really thought provoking. Always been kind of that kind of guy. But seeing this now has just been really fun and dynamic for him. You talked about this is kind of a radio host dream team. This is our first year of this podcast, so we've had an absolute blast talking about this team. Mm-hmm. What's really kind of jumped out to you the most was good and bad. Obviously bad, it's easy to say bullpen, Brad Brock, Amir Garrett, guys today who kind of had rough outings. But really kind of just the joy you're seeing in everyone picking each other up. And just I don't know if I've seen a Reds team this close necessarily and this exciting to watch.
Yeah, I think from the standpoint of being a fan and interacting with fans every day, I go back to Game 2, the Nick Castellanos thing, because at that moment you could feel, with Cincinnati, there's always sort of an us versus them sort of mentality, and I think sometimes it's overblown, but there was this sort of catharsis of watching Nick Castellanos yell at a St. Louis. It could have been any St. Louis Cardinal. It could have been the corpse of Red Schoendienst, and I think Reds fans still would have rallied around that. There was something cathartic about that. Then there was something, it sort of rekindled, what it was like to watch the Reds have a rival or play in these, hugely intense games, and then baseball suspended him. And so fans rallied to the defense of this player who is, really the heart and soul of this team. And so I think from the get-go, it's been fun to watch fans rally around this club and get to know some of these guys. We're making a case for Jonathan India to be the rookie of the year, who, aside from folks like yourself who are hardcore people, really knew much about him. And what an addition to this club he's been. It's been things like that. It's been watching Nick Castellanos very organically turn into a fan favorite. A guy that everybody was excited that they acquired, but let's face it, for the most part, he had played in the American League for a team that hasn't been that good in a while, sort of, toiling pretty anonymously. And he comes here. His season last year was quiet. It wasn't bad, but it also wasn't great. And then he's become sort of the emotional core of this team, a leader, certainly very productive. So it's been fun to watch people rally around that. And then the other part of it is this has been the first year, and you guys see it all the time on social media. This has been the first year since I've been doing radio that we've talked extensively about the role of ownership in the construction of the club. And that's been an interesting juxtaposition that it's a team that people like. It's an ownership group that people are distrustful of, and that they're not, that they're skeptical of, and that they are very critical of. And, I've always, in doing the job that I have, whenever anything goes wrong with the Bengals, whenever anything goes wrong, it doesn't matter what it is, there are people who default to, let's blame Mike Brown. And sometimes that criticism is earned. Sometimes it's overboard. But I've always felt like, this guy, no matter what happens, can't get a break. And then I don't know that Bob Castellini has been a terrible owner. I certainly don't view him as a sinister man who's, sat up in his office for 15 years, firing people left and right, doing everything he can to put pennies together. At the same time, the performance of the club over his 15 years has been underwhelming relative to what the expectations were when he bought the team. And what they did this offseason did have a direct impact on the on-field fortunes of this year's team. And people have noticed, and they're angry. And even if they're not angry, they're, again, skeptical of and mistrustful. And that's where the blame goes. We've talked less about the role of David Bell and sometimes less even about the team itself. And whenever anything goes wrong, the finger gets pointed right or wrong at team ownership. And again, I think some of the criticisms are very valid. I think some go drastically overboard, but you're always going to have that. That sort of contrast has been really interesting to me because in years past, and I think this is probably true around baseball, in years past, when the Reds haven't been very good, and God knows there's been a ton of years like that, the finger gets pointed at the system, economic disparities in the sport, bad players, bad manager, whatever. We don't talk about ownership. And this year it's, look, the players are fine. The people running the club are doing everything they can to put a good product on the field. We don't know about this owner. And that's been very, very interesting to watch unfold.
Well, I made the joke at the beginning of the episode about you and I both participated in the adding to the beer cans, the beer cups. And,
why do we have to keep coming back to that?
I have a point. My point with it is you sent out a really awesome tweet, just kind of speaking on behalf of Reds fans that night about like, look, these are actual fans. These guys are here because they want to be here. They missed the stadium during the pandemic. They love being here. And you feel this energy back in the stadium as far as the fans that are there. It feels like every night people are into every out. And I don't know if we've really felt that maybe since the 2012 Giants series no one wants to talk about.
Yeah. I think my general point was this town is dying for this team to win. Whenever I hear people talk, well, it's apathy setting in and younger fans, they're becoming detached from the Reds. This town is dying for this team to win. And they badly, it's, I get upset when people throw attendance figures in my face and I'm like, number one, that's a little bit of an outdated metric. Yes. Number two, look, the team over the last 30 years just hasn't been great. What do you want? People are going to stop going. They're going to get out of the habit of going to ball games. So there's a lot of different sort of anecdotal factors that go into why people go or don't go. But I just, if you ever needed an illustration as to the thirst and the appetite that people have in this town for this team to be good, go back to right before Christmas, 2018, when the Reds traded Homer Bailey for 4 breathing people, which is a miracle. The fact that they got 4 human beings who have a pulse for Homer Bailey was nothing short of, and I know there were prospects involved and they've been in the news over the last couple of days or so, but so they make this trade and the only guy anybody cares about is Yasiel Puig, right? And I'm looking at it going, well, Alex Wood was an all-star and this Kyle Farmer dude looks like he could play a couple of different spots, and Matt Kemp dated Rihanna. So, this is pretty good. And that trade turned this town on its head. It turned this town on its head, and people were so excited and so fired up. And for a team that still at that point was most likely going to come in 4th place, they were just excited for, we got a guy that we've heard of. We've got a guy with a personality, and now the team is probably not going to win, but they're not going to lose as much. Folks got really excited. And by the way, the Reds drew about 2,200 fans more per game that season, 2019. So, it was to me, the perfect example of, this is a city, this is a fan base that's just dying to latch onto something, even during those really awful years when we were latching on to Scooter Gennett and Derek Dietrich. And it was just, people would develop fervor for players on a team that was awful. So now you have a team that's competitive at worst, players with big personalities who seem to want to embrace the fans. It excites people, and it excites people that deserve a winner. And I don't know if a bunch of people, flinging back beers and building a beer snake is the best way to sort of, best thing to point to. But I can't help but think as the season has gone on, what if by the time the gates opened, what if ownership would have done everything it could to give this team a chance? Number one, how good would the team be? Number two, how much more would people be ready to embrace this club? But again, getting back to those people that night, those were people that came to watch at the time what had been a pretty a team that was kind of straddling around 500. Really didn't look like they were going to be a bona fide contender. And you just thought, God, these folks deserve more than they've been getting, and maybe more than they will be getting from ownership. Since then, the team has rallied, and I think fans have rallied around it. So I kind of going to take credit, honestly, because I feel like the fortunes of the team have improved since that night. So you're welcome.
Well done, Mo. Well done.
You brought Luis Sessa here.
I did. Yes, I brought Luis Sessa. Yes, I'm the guy. Yes.
So, Carlos, I was going to bring you into the conversation here because you are a former professional athlete. So you can kind of speak to another former Major League Baseball player. So like what Mo's kind of mentioning there, as far as like the fan base being behind the team and stuff like, I assume like for you guys, when you go on the field every day, like you can feel that a lot more, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can even just point from take to the minor league level, because I spent a whole lot more time there, like playing in Dayton, Ohio. I mean, that was amazing. You had 13,000 people at each game, and we were terrible. I've told you guys before, we lost 90 games in 1 year out of 140. That's a lot, but it was packed every time, and you feel the energy. Every time I went in the ball game, I felt ready to go. You could feel the energy, and then you take it on the other end of the spectrum, and you go to the Florida State League, where you're playing in major league spring training ballparks, and there's 13 people in the stands. And it's really tough to play in that league. And so, I mean, it's just like Joey said earlier today, like you feed off of that energy. You really do. It's just not a figure of speech. It's actual. It's true.
Was Chattanooga fired up every night when you guys were winning there all the time?
Chattanooga was hit or miss, but most I mean, Thursday through Saturday was pretty solid.
Is that a beer deal?
Yes. That's when the live music starts kicking at the bottom of the hill, and you can hear it. Can't wait for the game to be over.
I love it. So Nick, we'll kind of bring you back into the conversation too here. So obviously I know you're our number cruncher here. You're kind of seeing what this team is, where they're standing now. I know we got Carlos, we got an Oakland A's win today for us. And unfortunately, after Tim cursed the Milwaukee Brewers, what should have been a curse did not go in my favor. We're still kind of chasing there. What are you kind of looking at things move forward for the squad? I know you had, was it 31 games left against teams under 400 winning percentage?
Yeah, I mean, 24% of the Reds' remaining games are against the Pirates. So like 1 out of every 4 games left is the Pirates. Brewers only play them 3 more times. So, I mean, yeah, the Reds got a big hole, but, a lot of the reason, part of the reason for their hole is because the Brewers have played the Pirates a lot more than the Reds. You can't ever bank on those games, you have to play them. But I definitely think there's a lot of opportunities. The Reds have a significantly easier schedule than the Brewers. I think they have an easier schedule than the Padres, although the Padres do still play a ton of games against the Diamondbacks and the Rockies. But yeah, I mean, I think the schedule's right there. This is a big weekend for the Reds coming up. The Reds are going to have 4 against the Pirates. The Brewers are off tomorrow, so they could pick up a game while the Brewers are playing the Giants, the team that has the best record in baseball that destroyed the Reds. So, you hope that they can keep chugging along.
And got Reds target Chris Bryant, if you believe all the ESPN stuff that comes out.
Yeah, and the Brewers have a lot of issues right now. They have like six pitchers, I think, on the COVID IL. So they're really, they just called up Sal Romano. That's where they're at with their bullpen. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's going to be one of these week to week things. My prediction is you'll see the Reds make a real big push. Then you'll see them fall back and everyone write them off again. And then you'll see them make another big push, and it'll probably be a couple of those for the rest of the year. And we'll see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair, and definitely an analysis to see there. I think one of the things I was kind of, Mo kind of talked about quite a bit as far as like the attention this team gets, and not just here, but now you're seeing it nationwide. So I was watching MLB TV yesterday, and it was the segment with Billy Ripken and Cliff Floyd. And they asked Cliff Floyd, what percentage you have the Reds making the playoffs this year? And he said 90% the Reds will be in the playoffs this year.
My man.
Yeah. So someone's drinking the Kool-Aid a little more than I was expecting. But, I think with the soft process was with Tatis on the IL is what he said. That's going to be a big effect. And like the Reds getting Castellanos back if he's healthy, which according to batting practice, they all things look that way. But I don't know if we can really put into words just how much that would mean to this ball club to be back in the playoffs.
I mean, be huge, I mean, yeah, the team did make the playoffs last year. I think people forget it or they just write off last year's season. But I mean, this is the first time since 2014 that we have a real season where the Reds are in the race into August. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a big deal. The longer they can hang around, you never know what will happen this year with all of the pitching injuries that are really racking up. So yeah, if you can just hang around in the race, you're always, I think, gonna have a chance this year.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Mo, I wanted to ask you this because we had this question. I know you've answered this question a million times in your career, but we had a Twitter question today from someone who said, something I hear a lot from Reds fans is how when we signed Brandon Phillips and Joey Votto to those big contracts back in the 2010s, it really handcuffed the Reds financially for the next decade, and that is a lot to blame for the failure the Reds have experienced. Do you guys think that there's any truth to that?
Did those Brandon was traded at the end of 2017 or 16? 17, 16, end of 16.
Those years all run together.
Yeah, I was going to say they really do all sort of run together. I kind of view them as separate entities. The Joey Votto contract, you were paying for all of his prime years for a guy whose skill set aged well. When they gave Brandon the contract, it didn't feel like they were investing in a player's prime years. It felt like they were pacifying somebody who they thought was going to cause a problem if they didn't give him a contract. Those to me are two different things. And Joey Votto gave them prime production. I mean, there were years, 15, 16, and 17 without having the figures in front of me where you could look up, the top 30, 40 highest paid players in baseball. And Joey Votto was near the bottom of that list. And commensurate to the production he was giving the team every single year, I thought was one of the best bargains in baseball. You were getting exactly what you wanted. 2014, obviously, he missed 100 games and didn't play all that well. But I mean, you got all of his prime, and his prime was really, really good. By the end of the 2013 season, which was they signed Brandon to that contract in April of 2012. By the end of the 2013 season, I know Brandon drove in 100 runs that year, but you could kind of look at this and go, all right, this is a guy who's kind of on the downside. Still capable of doing brilliant things defensively, not a bad player by any stretch, but you kind of looked at him and said, the Reds are going to have a guy here who this is going to peter out. Maybe he doesn't get to the end of his contract. Maybe we get to a point where it doesn't make sense for him to play every single day. I think as long as the guy that you've signed or the guy that you've invested in is giving you return on investment, I don't believe you could ever say, well, that handcuffs the team. Now, did the farm system dry up? Yeah, it did. I mean, there was this stretch from 2008 through, really 2013, I guess, where there was a steady stream of guys coming up. Some of them were more successful than others, but just, Cueto, Bailey, Stubbs, Bruce, Votto, right on, through Aroldis Chapman, ultimately Todd Frazier, Devin Mesoraco, just a steady stream of just guys. And obviously they traded, Alonso and those guys away for Latos, and they traded away Travis Wood, but there was still this like steady stream of guys, and that pipeline just kind of dried up. I attribute that more to this long stretch of losing than anything else. And then hitting the eject button way too late on, we're going to trade Johnny Cueto. The return very underwhelming. We're going to trade away Frazier and Chapman and Bruce, and we're going to move on from all these cogs, and they really don't get all that much in return. And you wonder just how could that have been timed better? I kind of view that as a little bit more responsible. for what this team went through. Homer Bailey never living up to his contract. Devin Mesoraco to a very large degree, never living up to his contract. I mean, if you're going to look at financial decisions that came back to bite this team, I don't view Joey Votto that way, especially now that in his age 37 season, he's having such a good year. And now you look at it and go, God, you know what? The next 2 years, maybe he can still be a plus player. But getting back to the original question, when they signed Joey Votto, most of us understood the financial ramifications. Most of us knew that was going to mean there are going to be some of Joey's current teammates who they cannot invest in. Most of us knew there was a really good chance that near the end of his career, they were paying for his past prime years. But it's up to the team to win while he's here. And as long as he's giving this team the production they're looking for, if they don't win, that's not on Joey and that's not on the contract. Phillips, as much as we all love Brandon Phillips, who is a first ballot Reds Hall of Famer, one of the most popular players they've had, the greatest defensive second baseman I've ever seen by far. You could have imagined, okay, at the end of 2012, 2013, maybe it's time to move on and you get somebody else. And it kind of looked like, God, I'm not sure that contract is going to age quite as well. And I don't know that by the end of it, if they try to move on from him, that they're going to get what they're looking for in a deal. And by then he's going to be able to say no to any trade. So I view those things as separate entities, but I don't hold those contracts specifically responsible or mainly responsible for why the Reds didn't win during the duration of those deals.
I completely agree with that. I think it's also important to mention that when Votto won the MVP in 2010, he made $525,000 that year. Like, he wasn't breaking the bank in major league levels.
Yeah, I mean, I've asked this question, not so much this year, but I mean, you guys all know, if Joey Votto hits into a double play with first and third in the ninth inning down by a run and there's one out and it ends the game, immediately the reaction by some is going to be paying $25 million a year for that. That is an awfully stupid way of looking at things. Yes. Or if, Joey, those 3 years, 15, 16, and 17 are three of the best consecutive seasons anybody's ever had wearing a Reds uniform. And you and I both know there are people that instead of appreciating what it means and trying to put it into some sort of historical context or even lamenting the fact that the Reds wasted it, will say something to the effect of, well, he should do that. He's making the kind of money that he's making. I have asked this of my audience time and again, and I never really get an answer. What if you're going to dwell on the money, if you're going to focus almost solely on what his annual salary is, what can he do that in your eyes equals living up to the contract statistically? And nobody has an answer. I don't have an answer, but again, I don't view him through the lens of, well, he's making 25 mil, he better produce. I view him through the lens of, he's making 25 mil because he's likely to produce. The thing that has always been amazing about him, though, to me, and I think you're getting it a little bit less, is the fact that folks have always viewed what he does both positively and negatively, almost solely through the lens of, well, he's making this much money and so he should do this, or he's making this much money and so he's got to come up big in every situation. It doesn't work that way. It's never worked that way. It's never going to work that way. That's always been, to a degree, frustrating to me, because I'd rather talk about the player and what he's accomplished. And look, there are times where, Joey doesn't perform well and it's a drain on the team, but I view it as, well, okay, Joey's hurting the team because he's not playing well, not he's hurting the team because he's not playing well and he's making $25 million. I know the money goes into determining how often does a guy play. And I do understand that. But the fact that people have spent so much time dwelling on it is something that I've never really completely understood. And frankly, nobody has really explained it to me why they dwell on it so much. And nobody's ever explained to me what he can do statistically that's going to make people go, yep, that's a $25 million season. It hasn't happened yet.
Well, I don't know if you know this or not, but you might have to go through this again this offseason because Nick Castellanos can opt out of a deal.
Right.
So
yeah. And I said that the other day. I go, we all want Nick back. I certainly would not begrudge him if he said, I'm going to try to hit free agency. I'm coming off a great year. I'm in my prime. Let's go. I think it'd be really fascinating to see how the CBA could have impact all that. But if you want him back, you're going to have to pay more. Well, guess what? Chances are he's not capable of doing better than he's doing this year, right? I mean, statistically, there's a really good chance this is his best season, much like 2010 was Joey Votto's best season. So then what's going to happen? You pay him more, the production looks the same, and you go, well, wait a minute, we're paying him more, he should be doing more. And you and I, we all know that's how a lot of people look at these things. It's great if it happens, but it's not possible. You get rewarded for what you did, and you get paid to keep doing what you've been doing here, if that makes any sense. Not we're going to pay you more, so you're going to have to start doing more. It doesn't work that way. But yeah, we could go through the exact same thing with Nick Castellanos, and I know this is a Reds podcast, but we're going to go through that one day very soon with Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, and that's going to be fascinating to pay attention to.
Yeah. Nick, I know you were kind of the one that was like, if I was in my shoes, this is what I would offer, and that's why. And like one of the reasons you brought up was the age group, and like Mo just said, this is probably the ceiling of Nick Castellanos. No disrespect intended, obviously.
Yeah, and I mean, we see how difficult it is to acquire people at premium positions for the Reds. So it's almost like that's where they got to be looking to spend a lot of their money. If they got to be very strategic with it. But the one point I would add on Votto is I would criticize more the Reds for wasting his 2017 season than anything else, because the rebuild should have been over by then. And that's my bigger complaint with Castellini, more than the average payroll, was more that he cared too much back then. That was, I think, the biggest mistake that he's made, more so than the year on in payroll figures compared to other similar markets. So I don't know. I mean, it's all how you're going to fit your puzzle with all your pieces and all your dollars that are allotted with certain guys who are on league minimum deals. Like Jonathan India is making nothing this year, and he's producing like Jonathan India could be a top 10 MVP candidate. Like that's not that far-fetched at this point. So there's just so many pieces to building a roster that it's very complicated, to have like a definitive, is this the right thing? Is this not the right thing? But
well, and what's always interesting about that from the criticism that, and look, I've been very critical of Bob Castellini. I think he deserves a lot of it. I think I've been fair. I think most people have been fair, but you can't say, well, he doesn't spend money, he's cheap, they don't care about winning, and then say, well, they never should have signed Joey Votto. Now again, there are deals that backfire. The Homer Bailey deal backfired. I understood the thinking at the time. I didn't love it, but I got it. Joey Votto, I mean, all right, we're going to pay for a guy in his prime. His skill set's probably going to age well. He had been, pretty durable to that point. This is before he got hurt in 2012. He's an MVP. It still looks like he has a lot of upside. He may be getting better. This is the kind of guy you invest in. They did, and people get mad about that deal. So, all right, fine. Well, if you want the owner to spend money, chances are that's going to have to come via deals that have some downside. And you then can't get mad every time the downside pops up. That, to me, you got to be fair. Now, if you want to say they shouldn't just give players away, which is what they effectively did this offseason, that's very fair. That sticks in my craw. It bothers me. I thought it was very short-sighted. And obviously, it's had a negative impact on the team, and one that they're still trying to overcome. But as a general rule, there have been some deals that unfortunately were very expensive, very lucrative, that unfortunately haven't worked out. I don't view the Votto deal as one that hasn't worked out. He has given them almost everything you could ask. Do I wish he would have been a little bit more productive in 2018 and 2019? Sure. Yes, we all do. But players get old. We knew that. We knew that when he signed the deal. You paid for his prime years. You got his prime years. You failed to win while he had his prime years, and did so in part because the owner kind of meddled with keeping fan favorites and not wanting to rebuild when they could have rebuilt. But you can't get mad that he doesn't spend money and then look at the deals where he spent some money and say, well, they never should have done that. That was a stupid decision. It doesn't, to me, work that way.
That's the thing I feel like I've been saying for years, is like when they were like, well, they shouldn't. They really need to sign this guy back, and they sign him. It's like, well, that was too much money. Why would you do such a thing? Like, you remember they signed Aroldis Chapman, and everyone's like, "Are we sure that was the right move?" And it's like, yes, he was tremendous. Let's call it what it was.
Yeah, and they've also, I mean, I'll give them credit to this degree. There have been some things that people clamored for them to do, which in hindsight, let's be glad they didn't do. Everybody, remember, keep Scooter Gennett. Yes. Love Scooter. But I mean, I had folks, oh, you got to just get it done. I'm like, yeah, you got time on his contract. I'm not sure he's ever going to be better than he is right now. I'm not sure he's ever going to be as good as he is right now. Like, let's tap the brakes. I went through the summer 2 years ago where it was, or 3 years ago. Well, you know what? This Matt Harvey guy is throwing the ball pretty well. Like, yeah, okay. Glad they didn't do that. Johnny Cueto is one of my 3 or 4 favorite Reds of all time. The Johnny Cueto contract in San Francisco has been mostly a disaster. And people hated Homer Bailey. So it's like, well, they should have signed Johnny Cueto. Thank God they didn't. I'm a huge Johnny Cueto fan, and I've watched him pitch this year, and I'd love to see him get a chance to do something special in the postseason. But by and large, that contract has turned out to be an awful deal for the San Francisco Giants. There were a lot of people who just banged on the table and said, "Let's do that." Hell, in May of 19. I took one phone call after the next about how, well, you build a team around a guy like Derek Dietrich, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Can we see if he can have a second good month? A lot of the things that people have demanded the Reds do financially have turned out to be, blessings that they didn't do them. Right. So they've acted responsibly in some cases, but again, I think had this offseason never unfolded the way it did, I don't really believe that folks would throw some of the big picture criticism at Bob Castellini that they have. I think what you can do is you could say, well, I wish they would have behaved differently this offseason. I wish they would have operated the team with the idea of, we understand we're losing money, but let's try to build the best possible team so that when the ballpark gates do open up, people are rushing through them to see this team. Let's understand there's going to be a long-term financial benefit. Let's also understand there's a pretty good chance we're going to have full fans in the stands by the middle of the summer. They didn't do that. I think they panicked. They shaved $30 million off the payroll. I think you can be critical of that. I think you could also say, look, this is the owner who said we're going to bring championship baseball to Cincinnati. There were no caveats. He said it. It was emphatic. He then sent out a letter to season ticket holders. I still have it somewhere. Here's what we're going to do. I think you're being fair if you say, look, Bob, it's been 15 years and hasn't happened. What gives? I also think within that context, you can find a number of smart things, pure baseball decisions that this club has made, financial decisions that this club has made that have turned out well, or even that didn't turn out well, but you can understand why they made them. And now folks are unwilling to do that because of what happened this offseason. I tend to think that you can sort of compartmentalize and say, here were some really good decisions they made. And here were some good decisions they made that didn't even necessarily work out, but you understood the thought process behind them. Oh, and by the way, a lot of that was sort of undone, or the momentum stopped because this offseason, they kind of panicked, gave players away, and slashed $30 million of payroll.
You got to keep Todd Frazier, right? That was the thing forever.
That's right. Yes, that was another one, right?
Yeah.
He had won the home run derby. It's like, you got to give him, $200 million. I mean, again, Matt Latos. I mean, I think it was Buster Olney or David Schoenfeld. Somebody, after Clayton Kershaw signed his $200 million contract, it was one of those two, had a list of who the next $200 million pitcher was going to be, and Matt Latos was on that list. And I remember kind of looking at it going, well, he's in his mid-20s. He's still got some upside. And folks were like, you got to get it done now. You got to get it done. Well, thank God they didn't. I mean, can you imagine that? So there have been some things that folks wanted them to do that they didn't do, got accused of being cheap for not doing, that ended up working out the fact that they didn't do them.
Was Mike Leake the best pitcher out of that class after left the Reds?
Yeah.
Who would have thought that, back in 2012?
Yeah. That's a good call.
Looking through the chat here, we got a couple. First off, Sam Cooper, Zoom background rankings, Mo, Nick, Carlos, Tim. What's so bad about my Zoom background here? I like the sneakers. I like
you
the
might
weedy.
You might be on the toilet. I'm not sure.
I'm not. Yeah. I wouldn't go that far. I like you guys too much. So they had that to Mo. Congratulations, I guess, on that. You're the first person to get that award.
Oh boy.
Max Alfonso, who is a regular, he asked if there was one player from the 2012 team, who would you add? That you would add to this team? Position players only. I don't know if there's necessarily anyone I would.
That's a really good question.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. Do I put Stubbs over Tyler Naquin? I don't think so. Like,
yeah, I don't think there's, I mean,
can Jay Bruce play center field? Can we cheat?
yeah.
can I take the best? Can I take that 2-month stretch where Scott Rowland, he sort of was alive again remember when Votto got hurt that year, missed 7 weeks, and suddenly Rowland and Frazier both concurrently just killed it. You know, they put Frazier at first base. Could I have that sort of run it back version of Scott Rowland, and can I put him at third base? Not the guy who struck out to end the NLDS, but some version of what they were getting at third base that year instead of maybe Gino. But aside from that, I don't think there's anybody.
I think I'd take Todd Frazier over.
Yeah, that's Todd Frazier's, either of those guys.
Yeah.
But the point being, like, they both caught fire at the right time. But yeah, I'd take Todd Frazier, 2012 Todd Frazier over.
He had a higher OPS that year than Bryce Harper, who won the MVP.
Yeah.
Who was the shortstop?
And he saved a guy from dying in Pittsburgh.
Oh, that's right.
It was Zach Cozart,
right.
but not when Zach Cozart hit. Zach Cozart was really struggled offensively and batted second for the Reds in the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a good spot.
Yeah, the two guys above bottom of the line.
290 on base percentage, batting second.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. Wasn't very fun. Well, Mel, obviously this has been awesome. I am curious because I know I like talking this stuff with you, especially. I know I joke with you all the time. You're probably sick of my Knicks questions. But when it comes to as far as like the broadcast team they have now, and this isn't a dig on the previous ones, and not just because John Sadek's our friend who promotes our podcast because he likes us. Just curious for you as a guy who works in sports media, who's been around a lot of these guys, like your thoughts on the current broadcasting teams. I know with Tommy Thrall now kind of running the radio program and John Sadek on TV. As someone who works in sports media and broadcasting, how do you view those guys for the job they're doing for this team this year?
I think they're all very good. I wish the TV guys would be back on the road because I think their jobs would be so much easier, and the viewer would be served by having them there. I know a lot goes into that decision, but I wish those guys were back on the road because I think you can tell a difference. I think especially if you watch critically and you watch closely, and those guys all want to be on the road. So that would be my first thing. I think with John, this is a parochial town, man, you know, and you get thrown to the wolves here. You're not from here. You don't have a background here. And then you get the job and they go, well, you're going to work some games with Barry Larkin and then, you know, some games with Chris Welsh, and you're going to work some games with Jeff Brantley, and you're only going to do a handful of spring training games. That's very, very difficult. I could tell that the production, they're trying to take the broadcast in a direction where they're trying to lean into analytics more. And I'm 100% for that. But I think at the outset of the season, it felt like they were all overdoing it just a little bit. And that's okay. That's, you know, you've got to strike a happy balance. I think in a year, I think frankly, we're going to be better equipped to answer that question after John's had a chance to do the games for a year, have better access to the players during spring training, have better access to the guys, during a season, and hopefully, you know, a year from now, it's the way it was pre-2020. But I think sort of working within those constraints, John's doing a really nice job. I love the enthusiasm. I love I think he's great at asking his partners really good questions. And that to me is the thing that has always made Dan Horde so good doing Bengals and UC games. He's great at setting up his broadcasters. With Barry Larkin, Barry Larkin is my favorite all-time player. He certainly adds a unique perspective. I and he's never called games on a daily basis. And I know he's not calling them all. He's never called games on a daily basis either. Had never probably met John Sadak before. I think their chemistry is a work in progress. I'll tell you what I really enjoyed is I enjoyed them throwing Sam LaCure in the booth the last couple of games because it's a unique perspective. It's a different perspective. Sam has gotten a little bit more polished. And it's fun to listen to a pitcher and a hitter talk about, their sort of specialties and combine them. On the radio, I think Tommy Thrall's great. I think Tommy, you talk about a difficult gig. And he had the benefit of sort of having his ring kissed by Marty because he was part of the broadcast in 2019, did the pre and post game, called some games. But you're replacing, say what you want about him, but one of the most popular, one of the most accomplished, iconic broadcasters ever. You replace him, and then year one, you're calling games in empty ballparks or remotely. That could not have been easy. And I thought Tommy handled that very, very well. I think he and Chris Welsh and Jeff Brantley are great together. And so I think they're doing a really nice job. There's certainly there is a positivity to the broadcast that I think the Reds are probably encouraging, and they're not the only team that's doing that. I mean, that's sort of how things are going right now. But I think all things considered, the broadcasters are doing a nice job. Nothing against anybody who was in the broadcast booth here and there, but it felt like for a while, like it was, well, we've got the broadcasters we have now, and then Doug Flynn's going to come do some games, and then here's Danny Graves, and we're going to bring back George Grant and it's nothing against any of those guys. I think Danny Graves is really good at what he does, but it's kind of nice as a listener. The one thing we're always taught in broadcasting is consistency is really important. For the most part, when I turn on the game, I know who's on. And there was a time where, for whatever reason, whether it was Marty taking time off, which great, or Tom taking time off, or having a national broadcast, or we got to give Doug Flynn some games, or now here's Danny Graves. Sam's going to do some games on radio. For the most part, it's pretty much, these are the broadcasters, turn the game on. It doesn't take forever to figure out who's on. I really appreciate that.
I like Barry Larkin a lot more than I thought I was. I thought I would. I went into the season thinking I was going to just dread it because of some of his previous games back when he was with ESPN. I think overall he's done a pretty good job. He has work to do, but it's his first season. I feel like he's overall has a good perspective, even if I don't agree with some of like the ways he thinks about baseball, like analytically. I feel like he at least is explaining things in a good manner, and I think he has a nice positive spin that I was not expecting from him. He does a pretty good job of not making it feel like, well, the game was better back when I played. That's what I thought it was going to be. And I feel like he has a good appreciation of the current game, which is I think the most pleasant surprise for me.
What you are getting from him is purely a player's perspective. And to me, it was illustrated. It was actually, it was a somewhat uncomfortable moment where they were in Chicago, or the team was in Chicago, and Sadak asked Larkin, maybe it was right before they went to Chicago. In fact, I think it was. They were getting ready to go to Chicago. And John said to Barry something to the effect of, well, the Cubs, it looks like they may be sellers, but, they could be buyers. What do you think? And Barry said something to the effect of, I don't have an opinion because I don't follow it. Well, that's what players do, Carlos. They're not the players just play, right? And so if you put the game in front of Barry and say, well, analyze this double play, or tell me what the pitcher is thinking here, or why did why did the hitter swing at that pitch? He'll do that for you. That's his perspective. But you ask most players, what do you think this other team should do at the deadline? They're like, what are you talking about? And so that was, with experience, I'm sure John will sort of, all right, that's not in Barry's wheelhouse. That's maybe not, that's not the question that you best put him in a position to succeed. But the game itself, what's unfolding in front of him, I think he's pretty good. And that chemistry will grow. I also think they've both been aided greatly by having Jim Day, because you're taking two people new to the broadcast, new to each other, in some respects, new to the viewer, and the viewer gets this sort of reassuring, familiar presence of Jim Day, who obviously has a great relationship with the players, has been around the team forever, kind of gets it. If something comes up, there's a reference that, John Sadak isn't necessarily, there was Sadak made a reference to Barry Larkin hitting with the bases loaded, and Larkin, who famously took 18 years to hit a grand slam, sort of made an offhanded comment about, well, it took me 18 years to hit a grand slam. And you could tell like Sadak didn't know that. And like Day slid in perfectly. He's like, oh yeah, I'll never forget that night against the Mets, blah, blah, blah. And it saved the moment. Because Jim Day was there for that. That has been, I think, this year crucial, especially just given the fact that everybody here is new. Everybody's new with each other. It's a work in progress. It's been great to have somebody who's, been around, been the block, and that viewers know, and I think respect. That's been good.
Yeah, I think with that Larkin point, I think one of the cool things is just having that insight, right? Like for us, like we have Carlos. Carlos, you pitched in the majors. So like for us to be able to ask you questions, like you like pick your brain about things, like it's cool to have that analysis. But I'm sure for you
I'm
guys,
the Barry Larkin of the show.
Yeah, exactly what I'm saying. Exactly what I'm saying. But I think for you too, right? As a guy, like you can tell like that, like Nick and I care way too much about baseball and we read way too much info. We I like to think we kind of know what we're talking about to an extent, right?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. That's why I always defer to you and Nick on what we should do on the trades, what to do with money. I'm just like, I don't know, get a better reliever. I don't know.
Here's how a guy can throw a slider.
Yeah.
I think John also really helps Barry with some of the. I don't think Barry would be as good or as passable if he was with someone other than John, because John is very, very well prepared. Like the one thing that always sticks out to me is when he's announcing the opponent's defensive lineup. He says this guy has this many defensive runs saved. That's something you have to prepare ahead of time, and that's really what Barry should be providing some sort of context on those type of things. And John provides a lot of that, a lot of StatCast numbers, a lot of just insight numbers. And I think that also kind of, helps save Barry a little bit.
Yeah, they've made big strides for me noticeably. Like at the beginning, whenever we found out that Barry Larkin was going to be, I was like, oh no, all these guys are going to get to meet their hero. And because, it doesn't really work out that well a lot. And, at the beginning, there were a lot of odd moments, John would ask a question and, Barry would be like, no. And then we're just sitting waiting. I'm like, oh, I remember sitting in our group chat, like, oh, that was awkward. But they've come a long way together and I'm looking forward for those two growing together.
I've only done I've done maybe 20 basketball games. So my broadcasting experience is basically this. But whenever I've been forced to work with a partner, have a recurring, it takes a while. It takes time to get used to their cadence. I worked with Tony Pike every Monday during football season. And the first year I kept jumping in on him because it just took me forever to get used to his cadence. It's also taken me a while to kind of get used to. Now I know specifically I could ask him about this and he's going to take it and run. If I ask him about this, that's not his strong suit. That takes time, man. You hear that all the time. Not everybody's Jim Nance and Tony Romo, man. It takes time to build chemistry. And, you think of the way traditional broadcasters work. They work 150 games with each other. With Sadak and Larkin, he's only working the home games. They've had Welsh in the booth. It's different. And I think understanding all that, where they've gotten to now, it's a pleasing listen. The litmus test for me is my wife. If I'm watching the game and she's playing on her phone or doing something else, or even watching the game, she has yet this year to say, I wish these guys would shut the bleep up. And God knows during basketball and football season, often as I'm watching games, she'll just go, these guys are driving me nuts. She hasn't done that this year. That is maybe the greatest compliment that you could pay a broadcaster.
Yeah. I think one of the cool things Barry has too is that, and Mo, you can attest to this, he has Byron as his brother, who is absolutely incredible doing Xavier games.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So like being around Byron, like when I'm around Byron at Xavier games, like seeing how he preps, how you write things out, I'm like, man, like that's something where like you get you more excited about Barry, like being around that and learning from that.
I was there when Byron first started, and it was rough, but it's rough for all of us who go on air for the first time. And Byron has really, really worked to be good at what he is. And he and Joe together are, I mean, they're fantastic. And I remember thinking and Barry had done some work on ESPN and MLB Network, and most of it I think was studio work, which is an entirely different animal. But I remember thinking if Barry puts the work in that Byron does, he's going to end up being very good. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if this is something he wants to stick with. And if so, I think he's got a chance to do this for a long time and be pretty good. You can never pass judgment on somebody doing anything right when they first start. And I would also be willing to bet that Barry has maybe been taken aback by exactly how much preparation and how much work is involved in doing this. And that's, I don't think that's not different. That's not new. I would be interested in having this conversation a year from now and just, all right, how are they doing now? And my guess is by then they will have completely hit their stride.
Do you think Barry would go on the road?
I don't know. I don't know if it's something he's interested in. I don't know. And I don't know what their deal is with Chris and with Jeff and whatever they're trying to do. I don't know. It's been a while since they've had one color guy for the entire TV package. And when they did, it was Chris, and they didn't have every single game. So I don't know. It would help, given that he's the guy calling the most games, the more games you give him, the better. But, at the same time, they have deals with other guys. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't believe John hasn't taken a game off yet, other than the like 3 or 4 national games. Like, that's incredible. Like, he's on a heck of a run.
Yeah. I wonder if this was like, hey, year one, man, you got to do the whole load, and then we'll go from there. I don't know.
Years where players like Joey, he wanted to play at 162, like just to do it, just to say that he did it.
Yeah, I wonder. I guess they would put Jim in the play-by-play seat if John took a game off. But yeah, he hasn't taken, aside from like the YouTube games and the Fox game, he hasn't taken time off.
And that's nerdy watches a lot of baseball. That's not very common. I feel like every time I turn on a Brewers broadcast, Brian Anderson is not on there. Now he does national stuff, but the Cubs, their guy, he's like half the time not on there. Boog Shambi. So yeah, I mean, that's credit to him, man. Grinding every night. I don't know. Is George Grand, is he ever going to do games again? Is that a COVID thing? Is that?
I don't know. I do the same thing. And like Michael K calls every freaking Yankee game.
Yeah.
He does a daily talk show, which I have no idea how he does that. Kuiper and Kruko do. I mean, every single San Francisco with John Miller, every single San Francisco Giants game. But you're right. The Brian Anderson never calls Brewers games, and he's like the main guy because he's doing golf or basketball or whatever. And he's my favorite play-by-play guy in the entire country.
Yeah, he's
at St. Mary's University.
That's right. Yes, that's right.
We also have Mike Breen as a Knicks fan, so you kind of like have like the be all end all.
Yeah, I have Mike Breen, and but Mike doesn't do baseball, so
yeah, he would do a great job calling a Votto home run.
Bang, bang. Good call. Good call.
I would be down for that. Let's see. We got any other chat questions? Anything before we wrap up here today, gentlemen?
I want to get maybe Mo and Carlos's take kind of on the revamped bullpen. Do you think?
Sure.
I don't want to say is it enough. I don't feel like that's kind of a big question. But do you think it's a passable bullpen to keep the Reds competitive?
I think it's going to be enough to get them for Sims and Antone to get back, and then those guys that are in the more crucial roles are going to get pushed down a little bit more. To come in the 5th inning instead of the 7th or 8th inning, they'll come in and they can pull that starter a little quicker, throw someone else in there like a Sasso or I mean, I don't know, maybe even Lorenzen earlier than that we're normally using them. If, Antona Sims can be the guys of old that we expected. And then, I mean, that's all you can really ask right now is just to get it to that point, get it to September where, they're within 5 games, they're within striking distance, and we're not, biting our nails with the 4-run lead in the 9th inning.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm getting Sims and Antone, the Michael Lorenzen that I've watched here since he's come back, Sessa, Michael Givens, Amir Garrett, that's pretty good. That might not be what they have in Milwaukee, but for the most part, when the bullpen gate flings open, if any one of those guys comes running out, I feel pretty good. And there now are some choices where it's often felt this year like, that bullpen gate flings open, your guess is as good as mine as to what we're going to get. That doesn't mean they're always going to be effective. I think what's going to be really interesting to watch in this sport is just what September looks like with starting pitchers, given the, already increased workload. We've already almost doubled up last year's total of, games started by most starting pitchers. What impact does that have in September? And are the Reds equipped to, handle whatever that impact is, whether it's a guy getting hurt, which we hopefully, doesn't happen, whether it's pitchers just simply can't go as deep into games. There's going to be such a premium on the bullpen that I do fear that maybe the gains made by the guys they're adding gets offset a little bit by just needing so much from this group. But again, just top to bottom, as much as it sounds weird to hear somebody say they're comfortable with the options the Reds have in the bullpen. Yeah, I'm comfortable. You're always going to wonder what if they still had Raisel Iglesias, what if they didn't give away Archie Bradley, but sort of within the confines of what they were working with, understanding guys are going to come back and understanding that guys like Amir Garrett have a track record. Yeah, I think their bullpen is going to be okay. I don't think you're ever going to say it's a strength of the team, but their bullpen is going to be okay. And I think also people, you tend to forget exactly how dominant TJ Antone was at times. We're having this huge conversation about, well, who should they use in the 9th inning? Who should get the high leverage outs? As good as Antone was early in the season, if you're getting that guy back, then that solves a very important question. Unfortunately, it's still going to be a while before he's available.
Yeah. And then, I mean, not to mention the added pressure that it puts on those starters, especially the young guys. Like, you can see it in Sonny Gray already. He starts getting his pitch count up in the 2nd or 3rd. You can see him like getting visibly frustrated because he knows he needs to get 6 innings. He knows he has to go that far. And then you try to, you got the other starters, though, in the back end that haven't had all that kind of success going deep into games, and they know that they have to go deep. That's added pressure that they're putting on themselves. Like Gutierrez, I mean, he's been doing well going deeper into games, but I mean, he knows going into it, he's got to give 6. That's what David Bell's telling him. Maybe David Bell's not telling him, but everybody in that clubhouse knows we need to get 6 out of the starter. The hitters know, okay, we got guys in scoring position in the 2nd and the 3rd innings. We better figure out a way to get those guys in. And it's just added pressure that I feel like once Sims, Antone get back, that's going to help relax everybody even more.
Yeah, I feel overall pretty good about the bullpen. It's certainly not a lockdown bullpen or anything like that, but I think people don't understand how few of those there are in baseball right now. So I guess my biggest thing was, today was kind of a rough day for the Reds bullpen. I would try to caution people when that happens, because it's going to happen again. It's going to happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that the bullpen's bad. It just means it's a bullpen. You saw the Padres, give up 4 runs in the 9th and 10th inning today with better relievers. Raisel Iglesias, as big of an upgrade as he would be for the Reds, and they should have kept him, he's blown 5 saves this year. So you're still going to have those things happen. So I would just, be prepared for that as the season goes on. It doesn't mean, one bad night that all of a sudden, nope, this is a terrible bullpen. They didn't fix it. They didn't address it. Well, it just might be one bad night.
I think often with some of these games, it's like the game in Chicago, the Javier Baez game. The easy target becomes the bullpen, right? Well, the reality is they had the bases loaded in the 8th inning. They don't score. They had first 2 guys on in the 9th inning. They don't score. Sometimes there's a defensive play. Like certainly I've directed a lot of ire at the bullpen. We all have. And there's moments where, it's inescapable. But oftentimes I find myself drifting towards, okay, what else could have gone differently in the game? They lost that Friday night game against Milwaukee, the first game after the break where the bullpen sort of melted down, and Malley gave up a fence scraper home run, made it 4-3. And it felt to me like at that point, like that was a huge blow in that game. What if he gets, what if he gives him 6 innings and gives up a run instead of whatever it was, 5 innings and gives up 3? And so I tend to think that at times the bullpen kind of becomes a meat shield for all this other stuff that happens within the context of a game. Last night, again, Malley's given a 3-1 lead and he gives it back and 1. So now, your offense has to crawl all the way back. They did put a couple of guys on in the 9th inning. Nobody could get a hit. There are moments like that at times just get shoved aside because the bullpen is the obvious target and usually deserves to be. But again, there are times in which the bullpen is almost set up to fail because somebody doesn't get a hit, somebody doesn't make a play in the field, a starter doesn't go as long as you would like, runs were given up earlier when they shouldn't have been, and those sort of things happen. And so if they can kind of mitigate some of that, then perhaps this bullpen is less set up to fail than it's been so far this year.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's an easy target, and it's been an easy target since day one. Everybody knew what the biggest flaw in the team was, and so it's kind of like, let me see, how can I say this without maybe hurting anybody's feelings, any fans? It's like,
go for it.
It's like the easy target. It's like the fan doesn't have to think about it. It's the bullpen here. They suck. And tomorrow morning, they're calling Mo to tell them how it's the bullpen's fault because they didn't think through the game like you just described, like all the opportunities. They're not doing that. You can kind of compare that to the Joey Votto, the money. Well, he went 0 for 4. He sucks. He's not worth it. Why? But what about yesterday? Like they're not thinking about stuff. They just react. And they put it out on Twitter. They call Mo. It's not for the thinking fan. Like they just kind of just react. And that's the majority of fans. It's like, it's like golf. Like everybody loves to golf. There's like 10% of people that are actually good at golf and can shoot under 90 or shoot under 100. And the fans are that way. There's like 90% that just stop at that. Like, oh, it's the bullpen. The bullpen sucks. The bullpen's terrible. That's why we lost. The bullpen blew it. But no, there were so many other reasons why. I mean, that's kind of my point, is just that we hear the most of the negativity and we see it, and it's just because that's it. Most fans aren't like as dedicated that we are, and into the game, to the team, into the city, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
No, go ahead, Nick. Mine was a joke, so you can go.
Oh, it's not that the bullpen, Castellini and maybe Crawl to some degree, they certainly deserve a lot of the criticism. But at this point in the stage, I mean, I feel like they've done a pretty solid job to address it, at least for the rest of the season. And you have to remember, like last night, the Reds needed 4 innings from their bullpen. Not many teams are going to go 4 innings without allowing a run. Average bullpen ERA is over 4. That equates to, I think, about 2 runs over 4 innings, if I'm doing my math right. So you're supposed to give up at least 1 run, maybe 2 runs. So, I think we have to try to remember that as we're watching the games, and I don't know, maybe not try to break too many things. Save some stuff for October.
I also highly suggest taking a break from Twitter from time to time. It's really not a bad idea.
I need that advice.
It's magnificent at times. Like, man, I did it on my honeymoon. It was the best decision I made of the whole thing. I was like,
how else am I supposed to call out Nick?
So when people get this crazy and their first thought is like, I have to tweet this, like Carlos said, it's like, doesn't have to be that way. At the end of the day, it's sports. Like, we love it, we care a lot, but like at the end of the day, it's sports.
Saved a lot in the drafts this year. Saved a lot in the drafts.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. You especially, because you like are like the Reds. You're like one of the big parts of the Reds Twitter area.
Good thing.
Yeah. Well, Mo, we'll get you out on this. I'm not going to ask you for a prediction for a record, or I'm just going to ask your percentage of optimism of the Reds playing in the postseason this year. That you're allowed to say, at least.
Yeah, no, I mean, the math in the Central is just hard. It's hard to overcome 7.5 games. I mean, if you look at how they've played the last 5 weeks, they've played pretty well. They've won a pretty overwhelming majority of those games, and they haven't gained any ground. That's just, they play the Pirates a bunch. I don't, for all their COVID issues they're having right now, I find it hard to believe that Milwaukee's going to go through a prolonged losing streak because of the pitchers they have. And in the absence of a prolonged losing streak, I don't know how you catch them. So I think it's them in San Diego for the last wild card spot. And it would be more of a toss up if the distance between those two teams was closer than 4. At the same time, the schedule is somewhat favorable for the Reds. Nick mentioned that the Padres do play the Rockies and Arizona a bunch, but this team is going to get healthier. I like their offensive makeup. The starting staff is fine. I'll put it between 40 and 50%, and that doesn't sound like much, but it's, again, I don't want to discount their chances in the Central. It's just 7.5 games is hard to make up in a third of a season against a team that's stacked in the starting rotation. That Milwaukee team is nothing to write home about offensively by any stretch. And their schedule does get tougher, but it's just so hard to make up that ground. I think that the wild card is realistic. That's a good San Diego team. We'll find out what's going to happen here with Tatis. We'll see if the bullpen additions can add up. And we'll see if they can stop losing these games that they really should win, like last night. I'll go in the 40 to 50% range, somewhere in there, which is frankly more than I thought it would be a month and a half ago. So, and maybe more than I thought it was going to be at the end of that homestand after the All-Star break.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way. Well, man, this was awesome. We thank you so much for taking some time and spending an hour with us.
No problem. Anytime.
Yeah. So everyone give Mo a follow at Mo Egger on Twitter. Easy.
That'll be worth your time.
Yes. And then, yes, if you are listening to us on the Apple Podcasts, please be sure to give us a nice solid 5-star review. It goes a long way. Thank you all for joining us each and every week. Have a good week and go Reds.